That was a nice move by Pipkins, taking it right to the rack himself. Wide open three, left wing, and it's good. Nylon, the dunk likes that, Matt.
A three from the right side, and it's good! The one, Pipkins, the man, yet again.
Hello and welcome to The Flex. I'm Matt St. Jean.
And this is Joe Howie.
Friars are playing this Saturday at Georgetown. It's the 1 o'clock game on CBS. And I'd say, Joe, this is a must-win game. Not for anything to do with any big picture stuff or anything to do with Georgetown or the Friars. It's really just that Georgetown is not a very good basketball team this year, and a loss puts a massive black mark on the Friars' resume.
Yeah, it's funny because when you say the term must win, I think like Marquette because they're on the bubble. I think Xavier because they're like another tournament team, Seton Hall, Creighton, Nova. Like I think of like the upper tier of the Big East, like playing against them, they're must wins. This is almost like a must not lose game. Like you cannot lose to Georgetown. It means the same thing, but it also doesn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, like I think everybody knows what you're saying is that there's a lot of ways that this game can go for the Friars, but no matter what, you have to end up with that W, even if it's ugly. And I mean, Georgetown right now, they're 109th on KenPom. The Big East has done a good job at having all of its teams inside the top 100 for a while now, but if you go back to our preseason preview of Georgetown, this is a team that really got stripped of a lot of its talent and is trying to establish a new identity. Well, I'll give credit to Patrick Ewing. This is a team that plays hard, that plays tough. They got a couple really good players. They got a couple building pieces, but they're not there yet. They're at least a year away from really being competitive in the Big East, and it shows with the record. They're 1-5 in Big East play so far. That one win was a home overtime win against St. John's. St. John's is just barely inside the top 100 on KenPom. They've had their moments. They had a lead on Villanova at one point. They actually led Villanova 46-28 in the Big East opener for them.
Nice.
Yeah, and they led for West Virginia at one point. West Virginia has a really good team this year. They led West Virginia by 6 at one point. They've been competitive against some of these teams, but the Hoyas can't finish this year. And at the end of the day, wins and losses are what matter if they haven't been able to get wins.
Yeah, I think you can attribute, not only against Villanova, but against a handful of other teams, Marquette, St. John's. Did they play Seton Hall or was that Butler?
They played at Seton Hall and
Right.
they've played Butler. They played both of them and lost.
I think the storyline of this Georgetown team has been build up a steep first half lead and then watch it evaporate in the second half. And that's attributed completely to their three top guys, Javon Blair, Qudus Wahab, and Jamorko Pickett. All three of them averaging over 10 points a game, Blair with 18. Those guys are talented, and we've seen the likes of them, specifically Blair and Pickett, in years past. Matt and I were comparing Jamorko Pickett to an Alpha Diallo type because he's listed at 6'9", and he plays the wing forward currently for this team. But a few years past, when Georgetown had some of their bigger guys, who was that? Jesse Govan, who was the other guy? James Akinjo. When they had some of their bigger players,
Josh LeBlanc.
Josh LeBlanc. Jamorko Pickett actually played the wing guard type position, like the 2 or the 3. He played small and he played big. So that's basically what we saw with Alpha Diallo. He started playing the shooting guard, moved all the way down to the power forward, and that's what we see with Jamorko Pickett. Now, the thing is, though, Georgetown's very top-heavy with these guys, and then it falls off. Not really much room for us to stand on as Providence because we're top-heavy too, but top-heavy in a league leader type of way, whereas these guys are top-heavy within their own team.
There's not a lot of guys. Yeah, there's not a lot of guys here that are going to be starting on other Big East teams or even playing serious minutes. Although I will note on Pickett, we talk about him sliding down the lineup into a bigger role. We did a little bit of investigating before this, and Pickett's actually, according to Georgetown's media, he has grown an inch. He was listed at 6'8", last season. Now he's listed at 6'9". So I don't know if they got new tape measures down at Georgetown, or if somebody slipped out of hand, or if he actually grew an inch. We didn't compare it to the rest of the team. Maybe they just added an inch to everybody. But yeah, it looks like he's gotten bigger, and they have talent to be competitive for stretches of games. They led Marquette by 18 points. They led Butler by 11 points. And they were competitive with Syracuse on the road. There's not a lot of big losses in their season so far. I think their biggest loss here is by 13 points, and there's a whole lot of single-digit losses. So they're able to be competitive. This is not a team that is going to roll over on you, and that's where I think Patrick Ewing deserves credit. But you got Javon Blair, who's a good guard. He's averaging 18 points per game. DeMarco Pickett is a solid power forward. Qudus Wahab has been a real treat to watch as a center. He's a sophomore. He's still growing. He's not there yet. But I think you can make some comparisons to where Nate Watson was as a sophomore. Very different play style. But in terms of the maturation process, as a guy who's still learning, still growing, you're going to get lots of sparks from him. And he's putting up a decent stat line this year: 12 points a game and 8.1 rebounds. Pickett also has 8.7 rebounds per game. There's a couple of guys that can really pad the stat sheet and do a lot, but part of that is the supporting cast. Your other starters, you got Dante Harris at point guard, who's been fine, but he's a freshman, not a super highly regarded recruit. You've got Donald Carey, the senior, who's starting for them at 3. I'm going to be honest. I've watched Georgetown's games, and I've done the research on them, and I'm not even sure if I knew that name before this. And they got like a handful of other guys that are going to contribute, but once you get past that top 3, it's really bare, and that's where the Friars should have a pretty significant advantage in this one.
Yeah, I would have to say the same there. And like you said, Matt, these guys are talented within their own respects, but they wouldn't necessarily be starters on any other Big East team, maybe DePaul. But this is a Georgetown team that we should not take lightly in the slightest. I know we said they're not very talented. They have glimpses of talent, but as a whole, not very good. But we shouldn't let that be like, oh, this is a rollover game for us. And I'm speaking not as you and I as reporters, but as the Friars. Like, if they're preparing for this game, I'm hoping that they're taking this as the toughest game of the year. Mm-hmm. Because if we go in there and we think we're coming off a win, this is going to be easy for us, we will lose that game. We will 100% lose that game.
Yeah.
And this is a must-not-lose game, because if you win, it doesn't really do anything for you except add a W to your column. It moves you over 500 in conference play, and it keeps your overall record over 500 and keeps you one win closer to sitting comfortably on Selection Sunday. Mm-hmm. If you lose, that bumps you back under 500 in conference play. It bumps you down a loss closer to 500 in overall record, and it's a huge, huge, huge blemish on your resume for the tournament. Huge.
Exactly. And this is, right now, the Friars, you have the win at Creighton, but that's it for signature wins. You want to compare them to last year, the Friars had all kinds of signature wins. And just the way the schedule works out, it's unlikely that the Friars are going to end the season that way with that kind of performance against top-tier teams. So what you have to do is just what do you call it? It's like a business thing. Just take care of what you got to do against the bottom-tier teams. The Friars also don't have that loss to Charleston or Long Beach State on the resume this year. There's nothing to offset at the bottom, and there's nothing that will offset it at the top. So to prove that you belong in the tournament, you got to take care of business. You got to beat Georgetown. You got to beat DePaul. You got to beat St. John's. Teams that you're supposed to be better than, prove that you're better than them. That will keep you where you're supposed to be. Or like that game against Marquette. It's not ideally the Friars want to go into that one and beat them by 15 or 20 points to say, hey, we're the better team and we're going to show it. That's not going to happen every game. Why? Basketball is hard. These teams are competitive, and there's not a massive, massive differential between a lot of these Big East teams. So some of the games, you're going to have to grind it out, and the win is what matters. That, I think, is what this Georgetown game is. If the Friars go down there and win by 30, I think we're all going to be excited. But as frustrating as a 5-point victory might be, in the grand scheme of things, Georgetown has been doing that to a lot of opponents, keeping games close and making you fight to earn it. And the fact that the Friars can go on the road, play a gritty, hard-nosed team, and come out with a victory like that, that's valuable. It's still a win. Number still counts for the resume and for the committee, and you're going to end up putting yourself in a better spot.
Yeah. I also think, Matt, when you talk about the point you made about going down there and coming out with a gritty 5-point win, that will definitely, if that is the scenario that we see, it'll be ugly. Everyone will be pissed off after, but it'll be a win. And I think what's important to note here is how home games and road games have really no differential in terms of actual game time atmosphere. Now, I get it, when you're on the road, you're traveling, you're in a hotel bed, you have to follow all these COVID restrictions that I'm sure the players are sick of at this point, but you have to do it. But what I want to get at is the no fans. And Georgetown, you don't historically see fans there, so it won't make a difference. But what will surely be different for the Friars is when Georgetown comes to play in Providence, because then there will still be no fans. And the point I want to make here is about the Marquette game. Like you said, ideally you'd like to beat Marquette by 15 or north of 15 points. If there were fans in that game against Marquette at home, and that game was at the Dunkin' Donuts Center, and Ed Cooley alluded to this in the post-game presser, that would have been a much different outcome. We wouldn't have needed overtime. AJ's game-tying three would have sparked a run. The roof would have gotten blown off the dunk. It would have been a completely different game. But because there's no momentum, and obviously there's momentum, but because there's no added momentum from third-party source, i.e. the crowd, games on the road and games at home have become, the margin of difference between a road game and home game has shrunken significantly this season. Now, I get it. A road game in the eyes of the selection committee still remains the same and holds the same weight. But when you look at the actual games themselves and the way they are played, there's very little difference.
Yeah, and the stats bear that out. Home teams are winning games in conference play at a lower clip than they have in the past years for Big East. Home teams are just barely above 500. Typically, they've been somewhat significantly above 500. Look at this game. This is where you prove that you can do the basics. Georgetown's defense is last in the Big East in turnover percentage and last in the Big East in free throw attempts. What does that mean? That Georgetown's shouldn't be forcing turnovers. They haven't forced turnovers this year, and they have sent their opponents to the line a lot. This kind of plays into what the Friars do. Play a clean game. Don't turn the ball over a lot. Get to the line a lot. Hit your free throws. It's going to look a little bit ugly. You're going to come away from the game probably not with a great shooting percentage, and you're probably going to have to get offensive rebounds and putbacks, and there's probably going to be a lot of missed and won opportunities and all that. But have David Duke drive, draw some fouls, get him to the line. Some of his best games have come when he's taken 7, 8, 9, 10 free throws, and you got an opportunity to get a couple of these guys up into high numbers. You hit your free throws, it's going to be a slow, physical, whistle-heavy game. Probably not super entertaining to watch, but a win. And again, like we're going to hammer home here, that's what matters.
Yeah, I think, Matt, a perfect example for reference to look at is the Providence at Georgetown game from last season. It wasn't a very pretty win. In fact, we trailed by 9 in the first half. But they played Providence-branded basketball. It was ugly. It was tough. It was defensive. It thrived on the flex offense, working in the paint. And we came out with a 10-point victory. Now, I think a couple of three-pointers from Pipkins and Malik White in the tail end there really helped us seal the deal. Pipkins had a nice step-back three deep in the shot clock to put us up 10. I think that was the dagger. But, again, one three-pointer typically isn't a very pretty game. You want to think of a pretty game, you think of 2 years ago, Butler came to the dunk and A.J. Reeves put up, 22, 23? You look at the Creighton game at the dunk last year, A.J. Reeves puts up 22 with, 7 of 9 shooting threes?
Yeah,
those are pretty games. Those are fun games to watch. David Duke, 3 alley-oops against Marquette at the dunk. That's a pretty game to watch. This is going to be an ugly game.
Yeah, and it could be a pretty game. The Friars are that much more talented than Georgetown. You put it all together, it could be. But you're not really judging this based on if it's a pretty game or not. And you go back to last year, the Friars swept Georgetown in the second contest at Georgetown. David Duke got held scoreless. He had 10 points in the first meeting, but like that's kind of the game you look at. I think that's a great example to bring up. Friars win by 10 in a game that Georgetown controlled for a lot of it, but the Friars' talent pulled away at the end.
Yeah. I think part of the reason Duke didn't really score is because I'll say 25 to 30 minutes of that game, the lineup was all 5 seniors. Like Emmett Holt, that was probably the most he'd played all season. Ed Cooley said it in the post-game presser, and I remember very clearly, he said it was their time about the seniors. Of course, being the sports nerd I am, I got chills because I was like, oh my God, I'm a senior. But it was the seniors' game, and Emmett Holt, he didn't score a lot, but he knew what to do, and he was orchestrating guys. Khalif was great. Pipkins and Malik were great. Diallo was great. It was a senior game.
Mm-hmm.
But now those guys aren't here, and David Duke has put up double figures in every game, followed by Nate Watson, who just came short by 1 point. If he had gotten to the free throw line once more, he would have broken double figures. But regardless, Duke and Watson have scored in double figures for a majority of games this season. AJ Reeves has brushed the surface of what he can be. Jimmy Nichols is on the rise. Alan Breed is on the rise. I mean, our talent is starting to click at the right time. Saturday's a great opportunity for these guys to mesh and work on a tough road win. And I say tough because I don't think this is going to be a cupcake.
No, it definitely won't be. You're talking about pretty games, too. Like, this isn't... I think the Friars have a history of playing down to their opponent at some points.
Oh, yeah.
And this is probably one of those games. Like, if I would not be surprised if the Friars played Georgetown close and then come home and play Seton Hall and have one of those pretty games against Seton Hall where everything comes together, and then you play St. John's at home in the next game and struggle and come out with like a 3-point win. Would not shock me in the slightest. And again, it's Big East ball. You got to play at the level of your opponent when they're good. You got to rise to that level, and you got to find a way to avoid the defeats, avoid those low moments.
Yeah. I think part of that, too, is matchups. I think Georgetown, we have the advantage in the backcourt, actually. In the front court, Qudus Wahab is bigger than Nate. Obviously, Nate has the experience advantage, but if we're just talking straight size here, Qudus Wahab is 6'11", and Jamorko Pickett is 6'9". That's an inch taller than our respective 4 and 5 in Nichols and Watson. Nichols comes in at 6'8", Watson 6'10". But then in the backcourt, you've got Breed. What is he, 6'2"?
Yeah.
He's
6'3"
2 inches taller. He's 2 inches taller, 2 to 3 inches taller than Dante Harris. David Duke is 6'5", 6'6". So he's got a couple inches on Javon Blair. And AJ Reeves is 6'6", 6'7", and he's got 2 inches on Donald Carey.
Yeah.
So
those guys will have an advantage. And this isn't even mentioned. Yeah, and this isn't even mentioning if Jared Bynum is able to come back. We really don't know. He's been a game-time decision for, I think, 3 straight games now. Eventually, he will come back and he'll see the floor. I don't know if this is that game, but if it is, this is a good kind of tune-up game for him. So,
if he does come back in this game, I can picture it in 2 scenarios. One scenario is we're struggling, and Georgetown has a lead on us, and it's one of those things where Cooley just cleans the bench looking for an answer. We kind of saw that in the first half against Marquette. We saw the likes of Bryson Gooding, Chris Monroe, Ed Croswell all on the floor at the same time. Like, I think Cooley sometimes will just strip his players off the bench in search of an answer. I could see him putting Bynum in if we're struggling. That's one scenario. The second scenario is it's late in the game. We've already established that we have enough of a lead where we're comfortable and we think we're going to win. He wants to give Breed a rest and he wants to get Bynum going with some action before, we come home. I could see that. I could see Bynum coming in maybe the final 6 to 5 minutes. But other than those 2 opportunities, I can't see him in this game for that big of a stretch.
Exactly. And it's, at the end of the day, I don't think that matters too much. Having Bynum against Seton Hall, especially because Seton Hall has been playing well, you want that. against Georgetown, whether or not Bynum is ready to go, you expect to win that game.
Yeah.
All right. I think we should start to wrap up. Give me your X factor and your prediction.
My X factor is AJ Reeves. I think his 13 points against Marquette kind of got brushed over by Duke's 30, and I think his game-tying three-pointer got brushed over by Allen Breed's game-winning three-pointer. The contributions that Reeves made against Marquette were actually really serious because he was our second leading scorer, and he gave us a huge three-pointer that extended the game. He misses that, and Marquette gets the ball back and goes up another possession. I don't know if we win that game.
Yeah,
The outcome is
that was
very
huge.
different. And I think in the heat of the moment and the way things played out after that, his shot got overlooked. So I think AJ Reeves is starting to come on again. Like I said, his offense comes in and out, and it's very sporadic. But otherwise, he's been consistent with rebounding. He's been consistent on defense, and he's been logging north of 30 minutes a game. I think this is a great opportunity. He has the size advantage to get back in the high scoring column. I think he could put up north of 15 points this game.
I like that. Do you have a score?
Yeah. Friars 75, Georgetown 69.
We're on the same page right now. I was going to go Friars 75, Georgetown 67. I think it's going to be right around that range.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Nate Watson for the X factor. Patrick Ewing knows what he's doing with his bigs, but at the same time, Nate Watson has a history of playing good games against Georgetown, especially at Georgetown. A couple years ago, he had a really good performance there, especially because that's close to home for him. I don't know if I'm assuming his family will not be in attendance for this one. They
No.
usually are for this game, but I think even though he's gonna be a big part of the game plan on Georgetown's defense, and Qudus Wahab is bigger than him, but I think Nate Watson's just the superior player. I think he's gonna have a grinded out performance. He's probably gonna get looks from all over, and he's probably gonna go to the free throw line quite a bit. 20 points would not shock me for him at all.
No, and not to mention he's probably going to feel like he's due after the defensive matchup he had on Theo John. So I would expect him to be thirsty for this game.
Yeah, and Georgetown's not quite as physical a team as somebody like Marquette. They're gritty and they're tough, but they don't have the bodies like some of these other Big East teams have. So I think relatively this is going to be an easier contest for him, and I think the Friars will pull it out with 20 points from Watson. I'm going on the record saying that. This game is 1 o'clock on Saturday on CBS. So this is the second straight game on one of the CBS networks. So again, not Fox or Fox Sports. Make sure you're tuning your dial to whatever CBS is in your household, and it is 1 o'clock, not noon. This is not your typical Saturday Big East game when it comes to start time or channel. But make sure you are watching it, and you'll hear from us after the game to get our post-game thoughts. Make sure you're following us on Twitter at the Flex Hoops to make sure you can stay tuned for all of our content. And as always, for Joe Howie, I am Matt St. Jean. Thank you for listening.
Go Friars.